Hey guys, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs podcast. This is Bryan. I am here by myself tonight. We got so it's Thursday night. We are going to go over the Friday slate, and sorry, it's just adjusting my microphone. And then Jay's going to do a podcast tomorrow night, going over the Saturday slate. We decided to break it up. Jay and I usually do the pod together on Thursday night for the Friday slate, but because there's two big slates, especially the Saturday one with 10 games, we decided to split it up. So I'm doing tonight's pod for the Friday slate, and then Jay's going to do one tomorrow night for the Saturday slate, so you guys get an extra podcast this week. So I hope you guys enjoy that. But you guys get just me tonight. But it's not too hard of a slate. We actually only have 6 games for tomorrow night, but we'll go through them and give you guys my thoughts. So let's start out. The first game that we'll talk about is Brooklyn at New York. So battle for New York. So interesting game. Not a huge total here. It's 193. So looks like it is. So that and the Milwaukee-Detroit game, that one's 194, and those are the only ones that are below 200. And yeah, so the other ones are significantly higher. So those two games are kind of the ones that don't, Vegas doesn't say there's a whole lot there, but I think there's some interesting plays anyway, and really in just a small slate anyway. It's only 6 games. You can't just eliminate 2 games from your thoughts anyway. So on the Brooklyn side, I think there's a couple plays. Brook Lopez is fairly reasonable priced. Like we said on DraftKings a lot this year, they just will not price these centers up very high. I mean, you have some exceptions, obviously, with Drummond and some of those guys, but for some reason they kind of like this. Their algorithms really like this like 7K range, and all these guys stay. So Brook Lopez is 7.6, which is pretty reasonable. I think there's probably probably better places you could go in your cash game. And a couple bargains, which we'll get to, in a couple games from now. So I don't think you have to go him in cash, but I do think there's some upside here. It's not a super great matchup. New York plays at a really slow pace, and they're actually pretty decent defensively inside this year. They got Porzingis and obviously Robin Lopez. So not as bad as they've been in past years, and actually provides some rim protection and ability to defend inside. So I don't think it's a great matchup, but I also don't think it's something that I would going to really avoid. It may make him only a tournament option for me, and especially kind of because of the bargains, or one particular bargain at center, particularly the slate. I probably won't go him in cash, but I definitely think he's underpriced, probably at 7.6. He had 34 fantasy points before last game, but had 52 the game before and been in the 40s before that. So definitely probably underpriced a little bit, so I don't mind that. Thad Young really struggled, had a bad game last game against Phoenix in 36 minutes, only put up 15 fantasy points, just really didn't do anything. But I actually think this is a great spot to target him. I mean, if you kind of look at his game logs, he hadn't been below 30 in the last 10 before that, and just really consistent, rebounding the ball really well. And I think it was just a bad game. I'm not really sure why, whether he was just it's not like it was a particularly bad matchup for him with Phoenix. They don't play super big, but maybe Marquise length bothered him a little bit. Or quickness bothered him, but I think this is a good spot to target him, because he obviously, if people are going to have recency bias and move off that Young, if he if he upsets you like he did me the other night, I had a bunch of them when he disappointed. I think this is a good spot to target him. Maybe not in cash. 7-1's a little pricey, even though I think it's probably fair on DraftKings. But I think you could probably get him at lower ownership, because one, it's is the lowest game of the slate in terms of their total, but and just because of the recency bias. So I think that's definitely okay if you want to look that way in tournaments. Jared Jack, I think, is fine too. He's at 6.3, and New York is not great defensively. They have Jose Calderon, who's maybe I don't know, him or Dame Lillard are probably the two worst point guard defenders among starting point guards in the league. So if you kind of like going matchup based, then you could go that route. I will say one thing that makes him definitely no cash is the fact that Shane Larkin cut into his minutes a bunch. His minutes been kind of all over the place, but he had a really good game last game. He played 30 minutes, and I think it was mostly just because he was playing so well that they just kept him on the floor. But if that happens again, they showed that they're not afraid to dip into Jack's minutes and ride Larkin if he's having a good game. So again, takes him off cash, but I think him or Larkin are potentially tournament plays. I probably wouldn't points chase too much on Larkin. He had that great game. He's only 3-7 on DraftKings, and he put up 36 fantasy points. So that seems nice, but I don't know. This seems a little points chasey. Hollis Jefferson is okay. He's gotten priced up a lot, so I don't really love the price there, and I think that he doesn't have a ton of upside at that spot. So not super intrigued in really either contest. About him, and the only other guy, so Andrea Bargnani is out. He wasn't playing a whole lot. He was getting like 15 minutes or so. So it's not like someone coming in is going to be super valuable, but I would assume that probably his minutes would go to Thomas Robinson. So maybe he gets close to 20 minutes, and at 3-1, if you're just trying to be contrarian in a slate, Thomas Robinson actually is pretty decent in a DraftKings per point a fantasy point per minute basis. And at 3-1, if he's going to get 20 minutes, maybe he just kind of comes in and cleans up on the boards and, just athletic, and it does his thing against the bench unit. And, maybe he can put up, a good line at his 3-1 price point at probably lower ownership. So I think you could probably look him, but I wouldn't go overboard with that. On the New York side, Porzingis is the highest priced guy at 8-1. He's $100 more than Carmelo Anthony, which I don't think even the most optimistic of New York fans probably would have guessed that going into the year. And I think you could target him really in the spot as well. 8-1 is pricey, like I just said, but he's been good. He's kind of doing a little bit of everything. He's been over 40 fantasy points the last two games, and he did it even in 30 minutes against the 76ers the other night, mostly just because the 76ers were awful without Jahlil Okafor, and they just couldn't keep the game close. So it was an actual blowout. I know a Knicks 76ers game before the year you probably wouldn't think it was a blowout, but Porzingis kind of dominated that game, kind of made Nerlens and the other guys look pretty silly and look to seem to be a talent discrepancy there. And, I think that he's got a fairly good matchup here. Brook Lopez is not a great defender. He gets a lot of blocks, but that doesn't mean he's a great defender. And, so I think it's a good spot to target him. Melo is at 8K. I'm not super in love with this matchup, really. It's just because of the low implied point total. He only played 26 minutes last night. Part of that was because he's recovering from some sort of illness that he has. I'm not sure if it's the flu or what's going on, but he only played 26 minutes, didn't play the game before, and didn't shoot well. He, shot like 30% or something like that. So obviously it's just not 100% right now. So at 8K, I think you definitely go him in a tournament. He's Melo, so he always has that upside, but I don't think there is, enough safety there where I think you could probably warrant him going in cash, especially with the low line and probably what's going to be a really slow-paced game. And I would assume that he would play. I'm not sure if there's anything out there where he wouldn't play, which kind of takes a flaw in a lot of these guys kind of out of the game, and I don't think – Not super interested in the rest of the New York guys. It jumps from those two guys at 8K or higher, and then it jumps down to Aaron Aflalo at 4.6, and everyone else is 4K or under. So I don't think there's really much there. So we'll move on. Next game is Suns at Wizards, and the line here is 212.5. And the Wizards are 1-point favorites. So definitely kind of the opposite sort of line from the last game. So kind of a lot of juicy potential spots here. So we'll start with Phoenix. So yeah, so I think Bledsoe and Knight are always in play. I think that this is a potentially spot where you could target them in cash. I think they're reasonable. Bledsoe at 8.2 and Knight at 7.7 on DraftKings. That is probably underpriced for them. And this is maybe a matchup that wouldn't have been as fast-paced last year, but the Wizards are actually playing pretty fast this year, and I think that'll continue, and I think probably even more so because I would assume they're probably going to start Chris Humphries, maybe even at center, and so it just kind of go really small against Phoenix, who's already going small, and it looks like Tyson Chandler, he was out Wednesday, and we're not really sure when he's going to be back. He's got a strained hamstring, so if he's not able to go, then yeah, you're looking at kind of small lineups both sides. So a really kind of high pace up tempo game that favors the guards positions a bunch. But so and that sort of game setting, I think that really plays to Bledsoe and Knight's skill set. So I think that they're both in cash and obviously both in tournaments. I don't have a problem playing them together in tournaments. I know that probably a lot of people would and say that's dumb. I kind of like it because I think it it has upside in terms of giving you a unique lineup. But it's not like I'm not going to put the majority of my lineups. I'm not going to have both of them in. I'm probably just going to do it, in just one or two lineups just to get the upside of that just one particular lineup, and maybe it hits and both guys go off, you get an overtime game or something like that. So I don't mind it as much as other people, but maybe pick one in your lineups and kind of rotate them in and out. But in cash for sure, again, I wouldn't probably go both in cash, but I think either are playable. And if you're having trouble deciding, maybe just go with the cheaper one, which is Knight. And then so we're not really sure who's going to play as far as whether Chandler's in, but if he doesn't, I think that Lin is still really interesting at 3.8. He didn't play as much last game and kind of struggled, but that wasn't really too surprising, mostly because they went against Detroit and Andre Drummond, and that's not really fair for anyone, let alone a guy like Lin who's still kind of learning the NBA a little bit, but. I think this is obviously a better matchup for him going against probably Chris Humphries. He has a pretty big size advantage there. So I'm not sure if the game caters him a lot because I think it'll be kind of up and down. But, I think he'll have potential to really clean up on the boards. And then obviously another question is whether Markieff Morris is going to be in. He did not play on Wednesday because of a knee injury that he had. And so they actually started John Lure and Alex Lin, and John Lure exploded. He had 20.6 rebounds, 5 assists, a block, and 2 steals in 39 minutes, and exploded. And he's at 4-1. So I think that this team, it's hard to say which guys to definitely target, but I think that you need to watch out. I think that if Chandler and Markieff are in, then I'm probably only on the guards. And maybe TJ Warren. I think that he's definitely in play too at 4.8 and probably an up-tempo game. But if Chandler or Markieff isn't out, then kind of respectively Lin and Lure are actually pretty darn interesting and would represent kind of some of the better values of the slate. So I think they're in play in cash games if those guys are out, and definitely really intriguing tournaments because it lets you get some of the high-priced studs in because of their low price points. On Washington's side, so Wall is decided that he's going to be good at basketball again. So he's had 2 back-to-back 63-plus DraftKings fantasy points, and his salary is still really low. It's 8.3. I know it's not low compared to most players, but for John Wall at 8.3 after 2 back-to-back 60-point fantasy games, keep on rolling him out. I think he's fine in cash. I know it's not like the most amazing matchup of all time because I think Bledsoe and Knight are pretty good defenders, but at 8.3 in a really up and down game where the Vegas line is high, I don't think the matchup warrants being that scared off. So cash tournament, whatever, roll them out again. Beal 6'9", I think is fine. I'm probably not going him in cash. I do think that, I would assume maybe Knight would be on a Wall and Bledsoe would be on Beal, so that worries me a little bit. He has played a bunch of minutes this year. He's played 38 minutes or more in the last 3. But last game he played the Lakers, which is kind of a seemingly a good matchup, and didn't do a whole lot. He had 26 DraftKings fantasy points, but he didn't explode for like 40 like we kind of want in a tournament at that price point. But I think he has potential here. So probably not cash for me because of the matchup. And I don't think he's that cheap. But I think in tournaments, yeah, he's in a really good spot to look at. Porter, I think, is fine at 5'3", especially. I think potentially they could go small and play him at the 4 potentially a little more. Washington's just so thin, which kind of leads me to these bottom guys. So Marcin Gortat is actually out for this game. He's going to be out for the next 2 games. Nothing. I don't think it's anything sort of injury for him. I think it's. I think his mom is sick actually, and he's going home to be with her and spend time with her for a couple of days. So, so he's out. Nene is. I would assume he's going to be out. He's officially questionable, but I would lean towards that he's going to be out. And there's everyone's really injured. Drew Gooden is injured. So. Really, the guys we're looking at are Chris Humphries at 3'8". He's listed as a power forward, but he's probably going to be playing center for them. And yeah, it's just they just don't have any guys. So he at 3'8", and then Jared Dudley, who's listed as a small forward, but probably going to play power forward for them. He's at 3'8" as well. So assuming that all those guys are out, which it kind of looks like it is, I think that. Those guys are definitely, going to be the top values of the slate. They'll probably be highly owned, but I think Chris Humphries is definitely cash game playable, and probably should be in your cash game lineups, assuming that all those guys are out, and he gets the start at center. A really good game where he doesn't really even have to be that great. I actually do think that he's pretty. He's probably underrated a little bit as far as his talent goes. He's a veteran and can crash the boards and do some things down low, even being undersized. But so the matchup doesn't scare me. And at 3'8", he really just doesn't have to do much. So him and Dudley are really interesting and super cheap for the probably super high minute loads they're going to have to play in a really good matchup. So I like them a lot. Kind of like. Kind of everyone that is going to play for the Wizards, just because there's so few of them, they're all going to have to play high minutes with high usage. So, so a lot of value there you could get in your tournaments. And obviously we like value in cash games too. So, so that's a great game to target for sure. Probably the best game maybe to target in the whole slate is that one. Milwaukee at Detroit's the next one. And the line is 194. Detroit is 6.5 point favorite. So this is that other low game we're talking about. Start on Milwaukee side. I don't know. I don't know what to do with Milwaukee. I'm not touching them in cash until further notice, and I'm not even really super interested in them in tournaments either. Greg Monroe, his price is dipped, but his play hasn't been very good either. He hasn't gotten above. His last 4-minute totals are 28, 25, 30, 19. Not really doing much there. Giannis is 6'7", but not doing much. He's only played 26 and 20 minutes the last 2 and put up about 1 fantasy point per minute, which is definitely not hitting his value at that price point. Chris Middleton, kind of same story. Not impressive. Bayless did not play coach's decision, just kind of out of the blue, and they decided to play Tyler Ennis. I'm not really sure why. Apparently they wanted to see what they have in Tyler Ennis, so he played 24 minutes and put up 4 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist in that time frame, which was good for 10 DraftKings points, which is nothing. There's nothing here for Milwaukee. I don't usually like making blanket statements because, I will get people say, like, if one goes off, like, why did you hate them? But Yeah, I'll stick to it. I don't like them. And I don't think there's safety here, nor is there really upside in this matchup. Detroit's pretty good. So, so that's my thing. Fade Milwaukee until we see them be good, because they're not. Detroit side, so Drummond is interesting. He's at 9K. He's obviously the highest priced center, but has been dominating lately. He last 3 games, fantasy points 44, 56, and 51. So just kind of destroying. The other night, he had 56 fantasy points in 27 minutes, which is ridiculous. Like almost 2 DraftKings points per minute, which is just unreal. He's a monster, and he's going against a Milwaukee team that's really bad. And really on both ends of the floor. They're not good defensively or offensively. So go him. That's fine. Reggie had a really nice game the other night. He played Phoenix, which is actually a fairly tough matchup, and put up 34 actual real life points, 3 rebounds, and 16 assists. It just exploded. He had 65 DraftKings points. Actually put up 30 real life points in the game before that. So just really hot right now. Just kind of dominating the pick and roll, shooting over 60% in the last 2. Hitting threes. He's hit 3 3-pointers in the last 2 games. Getting to the line. He's just destroying it right now. So, I don't know who Milwaukee's going to play, whether they're going to play Bayless, whether they're going to play MCW or Tyler Ennis, or it doesn't really matter for me. At his price point, I think he's an elite tournament option. He's kind of an elite tournament option all the time because of what we've seen the last 2. He can just explode. But I'm even fine with him in cash, even at 7.5. So I'm definitely okay with that. The other guys, I'm not on cash, but I think they're tournament options. Marcus Morris exploded the other night too against Phoenix in 42 minutes. He put up 24 points, 14 rebounds, had 52 DraftKings points. He had been nowhere near that in the last little bit, but had been fairly consistent. So he wasn't hitting his 61-point value. I guess if you want to, kind of tournament points chase, you could go him in the tournament, but I'm not really banking on that happening again. KCP at 4.8. I think they're better. Better options. Stanley Johnson. A lot of people did that same sort of thing where they points chase because 2 games ago he had 42 DraftKings points and played 21 minutes the other game. Last game it had 11 DraftKings points. So definitely don't go in cash. I guess if you want to try to pick the Stanley Johnson game every once in a while in a tournament, go for it. But that's it. Kind of, Drummond and Jackson are the elite plays, and everyone else is kind of middling. Okay, let's keep moving. LA. So the Lakers at the Hawks is the next game. Over-under is 202, and the Hawks are at 11.5-point favorites. Pretty big. I'll start with LA. So I think this is a fairly tough spot. I don't think that you could find really any cash game plays here. So I wouldn't really go any LA guy in cash, but I do think there's some potential tournament options here. Julius Randle had a really nice game the other night. He's at 6.2. Not getting a whole lot of minutes. I mean, he's getting around 27 to 30 minutes every night, but it's really solid for his his DraftKings point per minute. He's efficient in that regard. So I think he's interesting in a tournament. He had 19 rebounds and 15 points last game. So, he could potentially do that. Thiago Splitter's out of this game. And it's not like Atlanta is like a super imposing front court. So, I think you could potentially go him in a tournament and he'll have a good game. The DVP says it's a good matchup, and I would probably agree with that. Not good enough to be cash, but interesting. Kobe, I'm fading tomorrow just because people are going to points chase. He had 31 points, kind of dialed it back against Washington, but I'm not really expecting that to happen again. So I'm not really interested in that. I'm fading because number one, I don't expect it to happen again, and number two, I think recency bias will probably inflate his ownership percentage, and I don't really want any part of that. So, not interesting really. And then the other 2 guys that you can potentially go is Clarkson and D'Angelo Russell. I prefer Clarkson. I don't think D'Angelo Russell has a lot of upside. Yet. I mean, obviously he's still young. I think he's going to be really good eventually, but not a whole lot of upside yet in his young NBA career. Clarkson does, though, and at 5'8", he's probably him and Julius Randle probably the best tournament options if you want to go there. I prefer Randle if I'm picking one, but those two, I could definitely be okay with in tournaments. Atlanta side, so this is obviously a good spot. We always like guys going against the Lakers. Obviously, we want to watch out for, potential blowout. So maybe think hard about these guys in cash, but I think I'm even okay with them because they're fairly good price points. Millsap is interesting at 8.3. He's got just such a solid floor. He's going to be at, close to 40 fantasy points in most of his games this year. And at 8.3, that's right where he should be. So I think he's priced appropriately. And, if you go him in cash, I think that's really kind of always fine. Millsap's really good. And it's, obviously a pretty good matchup against LA. And, again, the blowout potential might scare you off, but, it's a pretty good matchup. Horford, I'm not going in cash. He's too inconsistent. I guess you can go him in a tournament, but, there's another guy, which we'll get to next game, that I think is a lot better. Teague is interesting at 6'7". I do like him a lot. I think that he's fine in cash and in tournaments for sure. That's a pretty good matchup against the LA guards who aren't really good on defense. And then, I guess you could look at, some of these lower guys. Really, the only one that I know that people are really going to be on is Cephalosha, who gets a lot of minutes, doesn't do a whole lot with him. He's had 2 back-to-back games where he's had 26 fantasy points, 29 and 26 the last 2 games, but had 13 points last game and took 12 shots, and that's just not anywhere close to the usage that we expect him. So I don't really trust these last 2 games. Please don't go him in cash. And at 4.6, there's just not enough upside to really warrant tournament play either. So I'm not really interested. So it's kind of Millsap and Teague for me in this matchup. That's about it. So keep on moving. Next game is Houston at Dallas. Over-under is 209, and the Mavericks are 5.5 point favorites. So we'll start with Houston side. So this is probably the most frustrating team in the league. But there's still some potential good fantasy guys here. Harden is at the top. He's at 10.5. He's been really good lately. Maybe not as good as we want him to be in real life. I know, there's that vine of him not playing defense, and it's pretty embarrassing. But from a fantasy point perspective, we're not disappointed really. He's been at so I'll read like his last 5 games: 52, 53, 51, 72, 62, 59. So safe hitting value even at 10.5, and a pretty good matchup against not guys that scare me. Wesley Matthews is a pretty good defender, but not where he was last year. And a pretty good high over under game. Cash tournament, I'm fine. So the big thing is Dwight Howard's actually out for the first leg of this back-to-back. He's resting Friday to play in their Saturday game. So he's out. So obviously that bumps Clint Capella up, who's going to get a lot of minutes. And, he disappointed last game. He only had 11 DraftKings points in 16 minutes, but we'd assume that he's going to get, 30, 40 minutes with Dwight out. So I think that he is a really good cash game play at 5.8. He's really underpriced at that, where his minutes are going to be. So, I definitely think he's interesting and no problems there. Terrence Jones, I think, becomes interesting in tournaments. I still wouldn't go him in cash, but in tournaments, because that would move Capella to the 5, which would open up Terrence Jones at the 4 with Dwight out. So I think that's interesting. You could potentially go Patrick Beverley again, but his price is up. I know he's been over 20 DraftKings points, so he's been fairly safe and solid the last 4 games, but there's just no upside there. So I wouldn't go him in tournaments, and I don't know. I get worried about in cash, so he's not really in play for me in either place, but I wouldn't really super make fun of you if you went that route. And that's about it on Houston's side, but obviously I think those plays are really good, especially Harden and Capella. I think are 2 pretty elite plays of the slate. On the Dallas side, these guys are just never high price, but offer some upside. Dirk especially offers upside. He had a really, really good game the other night. He had 28 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, had 47 DraftKings points, and at 6'9", yep. I'll take it. So I think that that price is okay in cash, and I think that it is also, he has the upside in tournaments as well. So I'm definitely fine with that. Obviously, we had the Darren Williams of old, take over his body the other night because he played 45 minutes and had 30 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 blocks, en route to 54 DraftKings points in the game. So I think he's in play. Obviously, that was against Portland, who in theory is a lot better matchup against Dame than it should be against Beverly, but we've just seen guys go off against Houston lately, kind of even with Beverly there and even with like theoretical good defenders and guys like Capella and Terrence Jones and Dwight Howard. It doesn't matter. They just haven't been good lately. So I'm fine with him too. And at 6'6", I think it's reasonable. I think you could probably go him in cash if you want to. He's probably not my favorite cash game play, probably not near the top of the list. But I wouldn't also like super make fun of you for doing it. But I do think that there's a lot of tournament upside for him in this matchup for sure. Zaza, what are you going to say about Zaza? He's destroying it. He 14 points, 21 rebounds, 46 DraftKings points in the last game. So he it's been really good in the games he's played. 6'3" is reasonable. Like I feel weird saying that I'm okay with Zaza in all contest formats, but I'm fine with him. Cash tournament, it's weird. He kind of defies what we think a player should be. Just cannot jump, not athletic, but just destroys the boards. Works hard. Is a tough guy who just kind of gets it done. So yeah, I'm fine with that. Wes Matthews isn't consistent enough for me to go cash, but I do think there's potential upside there, so I don't mind a tournament or two. And some of these other guys just aren't getting a ton of minutes. You could potentially go Raymond Felton, who is getting a bunch of minutes, but I don't know if there's a ton of upside there either. He's at 3.7, so he's not priced up too much. So I potentially go that in a tournament, but not my favorite option. So have a couple shares, but not like an overdo it or anything. Okay, and last game we got the Cavs at the Pelicans. Over/under is 207.5, and the Cavs are 5-point favorites on the road. So let's start off with Cleveland side. LeBron is 10K. If you kind of look at his game logs, he's been, right at the same place. 47, 46, 40, 50, 43, 45, 49, 46. Yeah, like he's been within like 3 DraftKings points in all those games. He's just super, super consistent. Still one of the best players in the world at 10K. In a slate where, small forward's not great. Cash tournaments, he's obviously got upside because he's LeBron. But, I think he's playable all over. Kevin Love is pretty pricey. He's at 8.6 now. He's kind of priced up a little bit over the last couple games. Didn't play well against Washington the other night. They defended him really, really well. But yeah, so I'm okay with him in cash. 8.6 is getting up there, but I think I'm okay. I probably prefer Millsap at his price if I'm choosing between those two. But I think Kevin Love is probably the better tournament option between those two because not only because of his upside, but also because he potentially might be lower owned in tournaments because he didn't play really well last game and because he's in a perceived bad matchup against Anthony Davis, which is fair. Anthony Davis is good. So, but I think Kevin Love still has a lot of potential on the offensive end. So I think that he is definitely interesting in that regard. Other Cleveland guys, I'm not really on. And there's no guys that are like have a really good price or have enough upside to really warrant a tournament. Potentially J.R. Smith, who's getting a bunch of minutes. But at 5'3", I don't think there's a ton of value and upside there. Maybe you can potentially get hot and hit a bunch of threes, but that's probably about it for me, I think. And then last team, New Orleans. So I think that this is a definitely. I think Anthony Davis is kind of in the range where you can kind of target him right now, no matter what what the matchup is. Really, he is at 10-7, which is still probably underpriced for him. His last 3 games have been 56 fantasy points, 61 and 62. Playing a bunch of minutes, 35 to 4. Yeah, so he's getting over 40 minutes the last 3. And going against a Cleveland team that is pretty good defensively with their numbers, but apparently Vegas says it's going to be fairly high-paced game. So and Brown doesn't even really matter as far as that matchups go. He's pretty matchup-proof, so I'm fine with him in really any contest format. Obviously, he has got a lead upside, so you definitely want to have some exposure to him in tournaments. And then, so Tyreke Evans is interesting. I wasn't sure what to think of him coming back, but he's had 2 solid games in a row. He's played 31 and 32 minutes. They said they were going to keep him on a minute limit, but they have not done that, which really isn't super surprising considering what we've seen from New Orleans coaching this year. So he's been playing well. He's had 32 fantasy points last game and 45 the game before that. I still don't trust because of the minute limit, so I'm definitely not going cash. But at 6'8" in tournaments where we've seen that he can put up a lot of stats in a hurry, 6'8", I'm fine with tournaments. So why not? I would assume Drew is going to be back, so that kind of him being there with Ish and now with Tyreke there, I don't think there's really enough usage and ball handling to go around where you could go Ish or Drew. I think it's kind of Tyreke, and that's about it. And then you could potentially go Ryan Anderson. I think that his minutes were a bit down last game. But he had been up a little bit before that. His minutes just been kind of all over the place lately, so definitely not cash. Same with Eric Gordon, who is coming off the bench now, got 33 minutes even with Tyreke. I'm not really sure that either of them possess a whole lot of upside in these matchups, so I definitely wouldn't try really, really hard to target them in tournaments. But I think if you want to have some exposure to them, because it's a small slate and you kind of can't get off exposure to guys, then I'm fine with that. Ashik is, he got the start. He played 22 minutes last game. They kind of rotate in between him and Alexis Agensa, and neither of them are really good or do a whole lot in their minutes. So, not super interested. So it's kind of Davis and Tyreke, and maybe you could go Rhino or Eric Gordon if you want to be contrarian in tournaments, because I don't think they would be super high owned, but probably for good reason because they don't have a ton of upside, I don't think. But so those are my thoughts. Good luck in your matchups Friday, and I guess Jay will be around tomorrow night to go through the huge 10-game slate. He's going to do it by himself, so he's a champ. He volunteered to do that, and so I hope you guys enjoy that and watch and send him some appreciation for spending his Friday night doing a podcast for you guys for the 10-game slate. So, so good luck, and I'll talk to you guys next week.